Jake always thought his dad was a little weird. While other fathers came home from work and watched TV or helped with homework, his dad would disappear into the backyard every single night. There, behind their small house, stood a strange metal structure that looked like a mix between a giant telescope and a radio tower. His dad had built it himself over many years, piece by piece. "What are you doing out there, Dad?" 8-year-old Jake would ask every evening as his father headed toward the door. With a steaming cup of coffee, "Just looking at the stars, son," Robert would always reply with a mysterious smile. Just looking at the stars. But Jake knew it was more than that. Sometimes he would sneak to his bedroom window and watch his father work. The man would sit for hours, adjusting knobs, writing in thick notebooks, and staring at screens filled with numbers and strange symbols. The whole setup looked more like a science lab than anything meant for stargazing. Robert had been a brilliant engineer at NASA before Jake was born. He worked on satellite communications and helped design systems that talked to spacecraft millions of miles away. But something happened that made him leave that exciting job and become a high school physics teacher instead. Jake's mom, Lisa, never really explained why his dad gave up his dream job, but she always supported whatever he was doing in that backyard observatory. The strange thing started when Jake turned 10. Their house began acting up in the weirdest ways. Light bulbs would flicker for no reason, even brand new ones. The television would sometimes change channels by itself, usually late at night when his dad was outside working. Their old computer would randomly start up and display screens full of numbers that looked like some kind of code. Probably just old wiring, his mom would say. But Jake noticed she looked worried whenever these things happened, even stranger. Their neighborhood seemed to have its own weather system. While it might be perfectly sunny everywhere else in town, dark clouds would gather right over their street. Rain would fall on their house while the neighbors across the road stayed completely dry. The local weather reports never seemed to match what was actually happening in their yard. Jake's friends thought it was cool. "Your house is like something from a movie," his best friend Tony would say. But Jake found it more confusing than cool. He started paying closer attention to his father's late-night activities. One night, when Jake was 12, he crept out to the backyard to get a better look at what his dad was really doing. Hidden behind the garden shed, he watched his father work with equipment that definitely wasn't normal telescope stuff. There were screens showing moving patterns that looked almost like conversations, with lines of text scrolling by too fast to read. His dad would type responses on a keyboard, then wait for new messages to appear. It looked like his father was chatting with someone online, except the messages were filled with symbols and numbers. That didn't look like any language Jake had ever seen in school. Over the next few years, Jake became more curious about his father's secret project. He started noticing that his dad's notebooks were filled with mathematical equations. That seemed way too advanced for a high school teacher to need. There were star charts covering the walls of the home office, marked with calculations and dates, going back almost 20 years. Sometimes Jake would hear his parents talking in low voices late at night. His mom would express concerns about how much time Robert spent on his research, but she never asked him to stop. She seemed to understand that whatever her husband was doing was important to him, even if she didn't fully understand what it was. The equipment in the backyard kept growing more sophisticated. Robert would disappear on weekends and return with boxes of electronic parts, circuit boards, and devices that Jake couldn't identify. His dad had always been good with technology, but this stuff looked like it belonged in a university laboratory, not in someone's backyard. Jake noticed that his father's behavior changed over the years too. Robert became more thoughtful, more careful about what he said. He would sometimes stare off into space during dinner, as if he was thinking about something incredibly important. When Jake asked questions about space or science, his dad would give answers that seemed to come from knowledge far beyond what any textbook contained. "Dad, do you think there's life on other planets?" Jake asked one evening when he was 15. Robert paused for a long moment, looking at his son with an expression that seemed to carry the weight of some enormous secret. "Jake, the universe is much bigger and more amazing than most people realize. There are things out there that would change how we think about everything if we knew about them. What kind of things? The kind of things that maybe we're not ready to understand yet, his dad replied softly. By the time Jake reached his 16th birthday, he had developed his own theories about what his father was doing. Maybe he was working on some secret government project. Maybe he was trying to contact other scientists around the world. Or maybe, just maybe, he was looking for something that wasn't from this world at all. The house continued to experience its strange electrical problems, and the weather patterns around their neighborhood became even more unusual. Their street had become famous in town for having the most unpredictable weather, with meteorologists unable to explain why such localized phenomena kept occurring. Jake's 16th birthday fell on a clear Saturday night. His parents had thrown him a small party with a few friends, and everyone had gone home by evening. As Jake was cleaning up wrapping paper in his room, his father knocked on the door. Jake, can you come outside with me tonight? There's something I need to show you. Something in his dad's voice was different. There was nervousness there, but also relief, as if he had been carrying a heavy burden for too long and was finally ready to set it down. They walked together toward the backyard observatory, and Jake felt his heart beating faster. After all these years of wondering, he was finally going to learn what his father had been doing every single night, for as long as he could remember. As they reached the metal structure, Robert turned to his son with an expression that mixed excitement with worry. What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, he began, but I need you to listen with an open mind, because everything I'm going to show you is absolutely real. Jake nodded, trying to prepare himself for whatever revelation was coming. For the past 19 years, I haven't just been looking at the stars. Robert continued. I've been talking to someone who lives among them, and son, they've been talking back. The words hung in the night air like something from a science fiction movie, except Jake could see in his father's eyes that this wasn't fiction at all. This was the moment when everything he thought he knew about the world was about to change forever. Jake stared at his father in complete silence. The words talking to someone who lives among the stars kept repeating in his head, but they didn't make any sense. His dad was a rational man, a science teacher, someone who dealt with facts and logic every day. This sounded like something from a movie. Dad, what are you talking about? Jake finally managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Robert took a deep breath and walked over to his equipment. I know how this sounds, son. When it first happened to me, I thought I was going crazy too. But let me show you something. He flipped several switches, and the screens came to life with soft blue light. Numbers and symbols began scrolling across the displays, but they weren't random. Jake could see patterns, almost like someone was typing on the other end of an invisible conversation. In 1987, when you were just a baby, I was working late one night on a project for NASA, Robert began, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. I picked up a signal that wasn't supposed to exist. It was too organized to be natural, too complex to be from any human source, and it was coming from a star system 47 light-years away. Jake watched as his father typed something into the system. Within seconds, new symbols appeared on the screen in response. At first, I thought it was some kind of equipment malfunction, but the signal kept coming back, always at the same time, always with the same mathematical patterns. It took me 3 years to realize that someone was trying to communicate with Earth. Someone? Jake asked, though part of him already knew the answer would sound impossible. His name is Zephyr, Robert said with a small smile. Well, that's not exactly his real name, but it's the closest human word to what he calls himself. He's from a planet orbiting a star we call Kepler 442. And Jake, he's been my friend for almost 20 years. Jake felt like the ground was moving under his feet. Everything he thought he knew about the universe, about his father, about their quiet life in this small town, was crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. This is impossible, Dad. Aliens don't just call people on the phone, Robert laughed. And it was the first time Jake had heard his father laugh with pure joy in years. You're right, it's not like a phone call. It's much more complicated than that. Zephyr's people developed technology that can send complex information across vast distances almost instantly. Think of it like the internet, but instead of connecting computers on Earth, it connects minds across the galaxy. Over the next few hours, Robert showed Jake years' worth of communication logs. The conversation started simple, with basic mathematics and physics, but over time, they had grown into deep discussions about science, philosophy, culture, and life itself. Zephyr taught me things about physics that humans won't discover for decades, Robert explained. But he was careful never to give me too much too quickly. He said young civilizations need to learn things at their own pace, or they can destroy themselves with knowledge they're not ready to handle. Jake read through some of the translated conversations, amazed by their depth. Zephyr wrote about his world, where beings lived for hundreds of Earth years and spent their time exploring the mysteries of existence. He asked countless questions about human emotions, our short lifespans, and why we seem to fight each other so much despite living on such a beautiful planet. "Why didn't you tell anyone about this?" Jake asked. "This could change everything for humanity." Robert's expression grew serious. "That's exactly why I couldn't tell anyone. Think about it, Jake. What would happen if world governments knew that advanced aliens were in contact with Earth? There would be panic, wars over the technology, people demanding answers I don't have." Zephyr made it clear that his people have watched other young civilizations destroy themselves when they learned about the galactic community. Too early, as the night went on, Jake found himself asking more questions, and his father answered each one patiently. They talked about the strange electrical problems in their house, which were side effects of the powerful communication equipment. They discussed the unusual weather, which Zephyr had explained was caused by the energy fields needed to maintain contact across such vast distances. "Mom knows about this?" Jake asked. "She's known for 15 years, Robert nodded. "She was scared at first, but she saw how much this friendship meant to me. Zephyr helped me through some very difficult times in my life. When I was struggling with leaving NASA, when I felt like I wasn't making a difference as a teacher, he reminded me that small actions can have huge consequences. A single teacher can influence hundreds of students over a lifetime." Around midnight, something new appeared on the screen. The symbols were different, more complex than anything Jake had seen before. "He wants to talk to you," Robert said quietly. Jake's heart started racing. What do I say to an alien? The same thing you'd say to any new friend. Just be yourself. With shaking hands, Jake typed a simple message. "Hello, my name is Jake. My dad has told me about you." The response came quickly. "Hello, Jake. I have heard much about you over the years. Your father speaks of you with great pride. I'm honored to finally meet you." Over the next hour, Jake found himself in the most surreal conversation of his life. Zephyr was curious about everything: what Jake wanted to study, what music he liked, what he thought about the future of humanity. The aliens' questions were thoughtful and kind, showing genuine interest in Jake as a person rather than just as a specimen of humanity. "I know this is overwhelming," Zephyr wrote. "When I first contacted your father, he also needed time to accept the reality of our communication. But I hope that someday you might consider continuing these conversations. Your generation sees the world differently than your father's, and I am eager to learn from your perspective." As dawn approached, Jake felt like his entire worldview had shifted. The universe was no longer empty and lonely, somewhere among the stars. There were others who thought and felt and wondered about the same big questions that kept humans awake. At night, "There's something else," Robert said as they prepared to shut down the equipment. Zephyr mentioned that he has a daughter. She's roughly your age, though their species matures differently than humans. She's been curious about our conversations, especially the parts about human teenagers and how you experience growing up. Jake looked up at the stars, which suddenly seemed much less distant than they had a few hours ago. Somewhere up there was an entire family that had become part of his world without him even knowing it. "What happens now?" he asked his father. Robert put his hand on Jake's shoulder. "Now you become part of something bigger than any of us imagined." "But Jake," This has to stay between us. The world isn't ready for this yet. Maybe someday it will be. But that's not our decision to make. As they walked back to the house, Jake realized that his life had just divided into two parts: everything that happened before this night and everything that would happen after. He was no longer just a high school student in a small town. He was now part of the first ongoing communication between Earth and another world. And somehow, it felt like the most natural thing in the universe. The crystal device that Lyra had given Jake became the most precious thing he owned. It was small enough to fit in his palm, but when activated, it created a connection across the galaxy that felt more real than any phone call he had ever made. Jake started college that fall, majoring in astrophysics with a minor in communications technology. His professors were amazed by his advanced understanding of quantum mechanics and space-time theory. But Jake had to be careful not to reveal knowledge that was decades ahead of human discovery. Everything he learned from Lyra had to be presented as theoretical ideas or lucky guesses every night. After finishing his homework and when his roommate was asleep, Jake would hold the crystal device and whisper Lyra's name. Within moments, he could hear her voice as clearly as if she were sitting right next to him. "How was your day?" became their nightly greeting, followed by hours of conversation about everything from Jake's college classes to Lyra's studies of interdimensional physics on her world. "I wish I could see your campus," Lyra said during one of their talks in October. "Father has shown me images of Earth universities from your internet, but I want to see it through your eyes." Jake would describe his daily life in detail. The old brick buildings covered in autumn leaves, his favorite spot by the lake where he went to think, the chaos of the dining hall during lunch rush. In return, Lyra painted pictures with words of her world's floating libraries and gardens that grew in perfect spirals toward their multiple suns. But it was more than just sharing daily experiences. Jake found himself falling deeply in love with someone he could only talk to, never touch. Lyra's intelligence amazed him, but it was her curiosity about simple human emotions that made his heart race. "Tell me about loneliness," she asked one night. "We don't experience it the same way on my world because we're always connected to each other, mentally, but you humans seem to feel it even when surrounded by others." Jake tried to explain the ache of feeling misunderstood, of wanting someone to really know you. "It's like being hungry, but for connection instead of food. You can be in a room full of people and still feel completely alone." "I think I understand now," Lyra replied softly, "because even though my people are always connected, I feel that kind of hunger when I'm not talking to you." Their conversations grew more personal as the months passed. Jake shared his fears about the future, his struggle to fit in with classmates who couldn't understand his unusual perspective on life. "How do you relate to people complaining about pop quizzes when you spend your nights discussing the nature of existence with someone from another star system? I feel like I'm living two completely different lives," Jake admitted during a particularly difficult week in November. "During the day, I pretend to be a normal college student. At night, I get to be myself with you. Sometimes I forget which. Life is real. Both lives are real," Lyra assured him. "But Jake, I need to tell you something. My visits to your world are becoming more difficult to arrange. The energy required is enormous, and my people are starting to ask questions about where I'm directing so much power." Jake's heart sank. Lyra had managed to visit Earth to more times since that first magical night, each visit lasting only a few hours but meaning everything to Jake. The thought of losing even those brief moments together was unbearable. "How much time do we have?" he asked. "I don't know. Maybe a few more visits, maybe many. It depends on whether the council decides that our connection is beneficial or dangerous." "Dangerous? How could love be dangerous?" There was a long pause before Lyra answered. "Because love makes people do things they wouldn't normally do. It makes them take risks, make sacrifices, challenge the way things have always been done. My people value stability above all else." As winter turned to spring, Jake threw himself into his studies with new determination. If his time with Lyra was limited, he wanted to make the most of the knowledge she shared with him. He began developing theories about consciousness transfer and long-distance communication. That earned him recognition from his professors. Your ideas are decades ahead of current research. Dr. Peterson, his quantum physics professor, told him after reading one of Jake's papers. Where are these insights coming from? I spend a lot of time thinking about the impossible. Jake replied, which was perhaps the most honest answer he could give. During spring break, Lyra managed another visit to Earth. This time, she appeared in Jake's dorm room while his roommate was away for the week. Seeing her in his small, messy college room felt surreal. This beautiful, otherworldly being surrounded by textbooks and pizza boxes. This is where you live? She asked, looking around with fascination. It's not much, but it's home for now, Jake said, suddenly embarrassed by the clutter. I love it, Lyra said, touching his desk where he studied every night. I can feel your energy here, your dreams and worries. It's so perfectly human. They spent the night talking about Jake's future plans and Lyra's growing concerns about her people's attitude toward Earth contact. She revealed that there were heated debates on her world about whether continued communication with humans was wise. Some believe that we're interfering with your natural development, she explained. Others think that guidance is necessary to prevent your species from destroying itself. The arguments grow more intense every day. What do you think? Jake asked. I think that love and friendship transcend politics and fear, Lyra said, taking his hands in hers. But I may not get to choose what happens next. As his sophomore year progressed, their nightly conversations became more precious and more painful. Jake found it increasingly difficult to maintain relationships with his human friends and classmates. How could he explain to a girl from his chemistry class that he was in love with someone from another galaxy? I'm worried about you, his mom said during one of their weekly phone calls. You sound lonely, honey. Are you making friends at school? I'm fine, Mom, Jake lied. Just focused on my studies. But he wasn't fine. He was deeply, completely in love with someone he could hold for only a few hours every few months. He was carrying knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of the universe. But he couldn't share it with anyone except his parents. He was living a double life that was slowly tearing him apart. I dream about you every night, Jake confessed to Lyra during one of their calls. I dream about a world where we could be together normally, where I could take you to movies and restaurants and introduce you to my friends. I dream about your world too, Lyra replied. I dream about experiencing a full human lifetime with you, growing old together, watching seasons change, having children who would be bridges between our worlds. Could that ever be possible? I don't know, she said honestly. My people have abilities that yours don't. But we also have limitations you can't imagine. The projection visits exhaust me for days afterward, and they're becoming more difficult to hide from the council. By the end of his sophomore year, Jake had to face a terrible truth. He was completely committed to someone. He might lose at any moment, and there was nothing he could do to prevent it. His grades remained high. His professors praised his innovative thinking, but his heart was breaking a little more each day. Whatever happens, Lyra told him during what might have been their last conversation of the school year. I want you to know that you've changed my entire understanding of what it means to be alive. You've taught me that intensity of feeling is more valuable than length of time. And you've taught me that love doesn't need to make sense to be real, Jake replied. As he packed up his dorm room for summer break, Jake held the crystal device and wondered if their impossible love story was about to face its biggest test yet. Jake's junior year at college started with the worst news he could have imagined. When he tried to contact Lyra on his first night back in the dorms, the crystal device remained silent. For 3 days, he held it every evening, whispering her name into the darkness, but no familiar voice responded. Finally, on the 4th night, the device flickered to life. But it wasn't Lyra's voice that came through. It was Zephyr, and he sounded tired and worried. Jake, I'm sorry for the delay in responding. We have been dealing with a serious situation here. Where's Lyra? Jake asked immediately. Is she okay? She is safe, but she is no longer permitted to contact your world. The Council has discovered our communications with Earth, and they have declared it a violation of our most sacred laws. about interfering with younger civilizations. Jake felt his world collapse. What does that mean exactly? It means that Lyra faces exile from our world if she continues to communicate with you. It means that even my friendship with your father is now considered dangerous. Some members of the council believe we should sever all contact with Earth immediately. Over the following weeks, Jake learned the full scope of the crisis. Lyra's people had been watching Earth for centuries, but direct communication was forbidden. Zephyr's original contact with Robert had been overlooked because it seemed harmless. One curious scientist talking to another, but Lyra's visits to Earth had attracted attention from authorities who viewed such actions as dangerous precedents. They're afraid that other young people on our world will want to make similar contacts. Zephyr explained, they believe that emotional attachments to beings from other worlds will weaken our society's unity and purpose. Can I talk to her at all? Jake pleaded. She has been forbidden from using any communication devices. She is essentially under house arrest. While the council decides her fate, Jake threw himself into his studies with desperate intensity, hoping that somehow his growing expertise in quantum physics and consciousness research might lead to a solution. His professors noticed his new urgency, and Dr. Peterson invited him to join an advanced research project on theoretical faster-than-light communication. Your papers on consciousness transfer are brilliant, Dr. Peterson told him. Where did you get these ideas? Personal experience, Jake replied, which made his professor laugh. Meanwhile, Jake's father had been dealing with his own crisis. Robert's health had been declining for months, though he had tried to hide it from his family. The stress of potentially losing contact with Zephyr, combined with a heart condition he had developed, left him weak and often confused. I'm scared, Jake, Robert admitted during winter break. Not for myself, but for what happens to the communication when I'm gone. Zephyr has been my closest friend for 20 years. The idea of him being alone again, of all this knowledge and friendship disappearing, it breaks my heart. You're not going anywhere, Dad, Jake said. But he could see the truth in his father's tired eyes. In February, the crystal device activated. Unexpectedly, Jake grabbed it, hoping desperately to hear Lyra's voice, but instead found a message from Zephyr that changed everything. Jake, I have been given permission to tell you that Lyra has made a choice. She has requested to speak with the full council about her relationship with your world. She wants to propose something that has never been attempted in our history. What kind of proposal? She wants to transfer her consciousness permanently to your dimensional plane. She would give up her physical form on our world to exist as an energy being on Earth, able to communicate directly with you and help bridge the gap between our civilizations. Jake's heart started racing. Is that even possible? Theoretically, yes, but Jake, you must understand what this means. If she does this, she can never return to her physical form on our world. She would exist only as consciousness, able to appear to you as she did during her visits, but unable to live normally among her own people. It would be a permanent exile, chosen willingly. And you're telling me this because? Because the council has agreed to consider her proposal. But only if you can prove that humans are ready for this level of contact. They want evidence that your species can handle advanced knowledge responsibly, that a permanent bridge between our worlds would benefit both civilizations, rather than destroy them. Jake spent the next several months working on the most important project of his life. With subtle guidance from Zephyr, he developed a comprehensive plan for gradually introducing advanced concepts to humanity. Through scientific research and discovery, his thesis paper, titled Theoretical Framework for Consciousness Transfer and Interdimensional Communication, became the most talked about undergraduate work in his university's history. Major scientific journals wanted to publish it, and technology companies offered him research positions before he even graduated. But Jake's real work was happening in secret. He was designing a foundation that would slowly prepare humanity for eventual contact with advanced civilizations, introducing concepts and technologies in a way that wouldn't cause panic or chaos. In May, during his final exams, the crystal device activated with a message that made Jake's hands shake. The council has made their decision. Zephyr's voice said, "They are impressed with your work and your maturity. They believe that you represent the best of what humanity can become. Lyra's request has been approved. She's really going to do this? Jake asked. She says that love requires sacrifice, and that some things are more valuable than the form they take. She wants to spend her existence helping both our worlds grow and learn from each other. And Jake, she wants to spend that existence with you. The transfer was scheduled for the night of Jake's college graduation. His parents, despite Robert's worsening health, insisted on being present for the most important moment in their family's history. As the sun set on Jake's graduation day, they gathered once again in the backyard observatory where this incredible journey had begun. The equipment hummed with more power than Jake had ever seen, drawing energy from sources he couldn't even identify. Are you ready for this? Robert asked his son. Once this happens, there's no going back to a normal life. Dad, I stopped living a normal life the day you told me about Zephyr. This isn't about going back. This is about moving forward into something amazing. The light that filled their backyard that evening was different from Lyra's previous visits. Instead of the brief, flickering appearance of her temporary projections, this light was steady and warm, growing brighter until it seemed to illuminate their entire neighborhood. When the light faded, Lyra stood before them, but Jake could sense immediately that something fundamental had changed. She looked the same, but there was a new depth to her presence, as if she had become more real rather than less. "Hello, Jake," she said, and her voice carried harmonics that hadn't been there before. "I'm home. Are you okay? I mean, how do you feel?" Lyra smiled, and Jake saw galaxies in her eyes. "I feel free. For the first time in my life. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She turned to Robert, who was leaning heavily on his wife for support. "Thank you for making this possible. Your friendship with my father opened a door between worlds that can never be closed." "Take care of my son," Robert said softly, "and take care of each other." Over the following months, Jake and Lyra worked together to establish the Interstellar Communication Foundation, presenting it to the world as a theoretical research organization studying the possibilities of contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. Jake became the public face of the foundation, while Lyra existed as his unseen partner, advisor. In the love of his life, Robert passed away peacefully that winter, knowing that the communication he had started would continue through his son. At the funeral, Jake felt Lyra's presence beside him. Invisible to others, but absolutely real to him. "He's with my father now," Lyra whispered in his ear. "In whatever dimension consciousness goes after death, they're probably comparing notes about their crazy children who fell in love across the stars." By age 25, Jake had become one of the world's leading experts on consciousness research and quantum communication. His breakthrough discoveries, guided by Lyra's advanced knowledge, revolutionized multiple fields of science. But more importantly, he had found a way to love someone completely while serving a purpose larger than himself. Standing at the podium of the International Physics Conference, delivering a lecture on the future of human consciousness, Jake looked out at an audience of brilliant scientists and thought about the incredible journey that had brought him here. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I want to talk to you today about the possibility that consciousness itself might be the bridge that connects all intelligent life in the universe. I want to suggest that love, rather than technology, might be the force that eventually brings different worlds together." As he spoke, Jake felt Lyra's presence in the lecture hall, invisible to everyone else but radiating pride and affection. Some of the more sensitive people in the audience seemed to sense something special about his words, as if they carried weight beyond their surface meaning. After the lecture, as Jake walked through the campus where his extraordinary story had begun, he held the crystal device that had started it all. "Do you think they're ready?" he asked Lyra. "Not yet," she replied, "but someday, when the world." 2 years had passed since that life-changing night, when Jake learned about his father's incredible secret. He had spent countless evenings in the backyard observatory, participating in conversations with Zephyr that challenged everything he thought he knew about life, science, and the universe itself. During his senior year of high school, Jake had grown closer to this alien friend than he ever imagined possible. Zephyr shared stories about his world, where crystal cities reached toward multiple suns and beings lived in harmony with nature, in ways humans could barely comprehend. In return, Jake told Zephyr about human struggles, dreams, teenage life, and the complicated emotions that came with growing up on Earth. But as graduation approached and college acceptance letters arrived, Zephyr began mentioning his daughter more frequently in their conversations. Her name was Lyra, and according to her father, she had become fascinated by the stories of human life, especially Jake's experiences as a young person discovering his place in the world. She asked about you constantly, Zephyr wrote during one of their late-night chats. She wonders what it's like to grow up knowing your life will be short compared to ours, yet still finding meaning and joy in each day. Your perspective on time and purpose intrigues her greatly. Jake found himself curious about this alien girl who was supposedly around his age. What did around his age even mean for a species that lived for centuries? What did she look like? What did she think about? Did she laugh at jokes the way humans did? One evening in May, just weeks before graduation, Zephyr's message appeared on the screen with an unusual urgency. My friend Robert, I have an extraordinary request, the message began. Lyra has asked if it might be possible for her to visit your world for a brief time. Not in the way you might imagine. She cannot travel the physical distance between our worlds. But our people have developed ways to project consciousness across space, allowing temporary physical manifestation in distant locations. Jake's father read the message twice before looking at his son with wide eyes. He's asking if his daughter can visit Earth, Robert said slowly. Actually visit in person. Jake's heart started racing. After 2 years of wondering about this mysterious girl from another world, he might actually get to meet her. But the idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Is it safe? Jake asked. I mean, for her and for us? They spent the next several nights discussing the details with Zephyr. The process would require enormous amounts of energy and could only last for a few hours. Lyra would appear in physical form, but it would be temporary, a projection of her consciousness that would allow her to interact with their world as if she were truly there. She has been practicing this ability for many months, Zephyr explained. It is considered a great honor among our people to successfully project to another world. But she wishes to do this not for honor, but out of genuine curiosity about your family and your world. After much discussion, Robert and Lisa agreed to the visit. They would clear the house, disconnect all electronic devices except the communication equipment, and prepare for something that had never happened in human history. A face-to-face meeting between a human family and a visitor from another star. The night was set for the following Saturday. Jake could barely concentrate on his final exams, constantly wondering what Lyra would be like. Would she look human? Would they be able to communicate properly? What do you even say to someone from another planet? Saturday evening arrived with unusually clear skies. The family had spent the day preparing their home, moving furniture to create an open space in the living room and ensuring complete privacy. Robert had modified his equipment to handle the enormous energy requirements for Lyra's projection. As the sun set, Jake found his hands shaking with nervous excitement. His parents were just as anxious, but they tried to stay calm for his sake. Remember, Robert said as they gathered around the communication equipment, this is completely new for all of us. Just be yourself, Jake. Zephyr says she's just as nervous as you are. At exactly 9 p.m., the equipment began humming with more energy than Jake had ever seen it produce. The air in the room felt different, charged with electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up. Lights dimmed throughout the house, and Jake could hear a low, musical sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then, in the center of their living room, light began to gather. Not harsh, bright light, but something soft and warm that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The light grew brighter and began to take shape, first just a vague outline, then gradually becoming more solid and defined. Jake held his breath as the light faded, revealing a young woman standing in their living room. She was beautiful in a way that was both completely human and utterly otherworldly. She appeared to be about Jake's age, with long hair that seemed to shift between different shades of blue and silver. depending on how the light hit it. Her eyes were the most striking feature. They were large and expressive, changing color from deep blue to bright green as she looked around the room. She wore clothing that looked like it was made from starlight itself, flowing and shimmering with each movement. When she smiled, Jake felt like he was seeing the sun rise for the first time. "Hello," she said, and her voice was like music. "I am Lyra. I cannot believe I am actually here." Jake tried to speak, but found he had completely forgotten how words worked. His parents stepped forward to greet their impossible guest, but Jake remained frozen, staring at this incredible being who had traveled across the galaxy just to meet them. "You must be Jake," Lyra said, turning her attention to him. "I have heard so much about you. You look exactly as I imagined, except—" She paused, tilting her head slightly. "You seem surprised. Did you not expect me to look so much like a human?" "I don't know what I expected," Jake finally managed to say. "This is all pretty overwhelming," Lyra laughed, and the sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "For me as well. I have dreamed of this moment for so long, but actually, being here, breathing your air, feeling gravity pull at me in a different way, it is more wonderful than I ever imagined." They spent the next few hours in conversation that ranged from profound to playful. Lyra was fascinated by everything: the texture of their furniture, the taste of water, the way shadows fell across the room. She asked Jake about his dreams for the future, his fears about leaving home for college, his thoughts on love and friendship and what it meant to be human on my world. "We have time to contemplate every decision for years," she explained, "but you humans must make choices quickly, with incomplete information, knowing that your time is limited." I find that both terrifying and beautiful. As the night progressed, Jake found himself more and more drawn to this extraordinary girl. She was intelligent and curious, but also playful and kind. She understood concepts that Jake had never even thought about, yet she was genuinely interested in his simple, human perspective on life. "I envy you in some ways," Lyra admitted as they sat together on the couch. "Your short lives force you to feel everything so intensely. Every moment matters, because you know it won't last forever. We live for centuries, so we sometimes take time for granted. But you get to see the universe change and grow," Jake replied. "You get to learn things and experience things that we can't even imagine." "Perhaps," Lyra said softly, "but I think there is something beautiful about burning brightly for a short time, rather than glowing dimly for centuries." As dawn approached, Lyra began to flicker slightly, like a television with poor reception. The projection was weakening, and Jake realized their time together was almost over. "I have to go soon," she said, and Jake could hear sadness in her voice. "But Jake, I want you to know that this night has been the most amazing experience of my life. You have shown me what it means to be truly alive." Just before she faded away completely, Lyra reached into her shimmering clothing and pulled out a small device that looked like a crystal wrapped in silver wires. "This is for you," she said, placing it in Jake's hands. "It will allow us to communicate directly, without going through our father's equipment. I hope we can talk again soon." As the first rays of sunlight entered the room, Lyra's form became transparent, then dissolved into sparkling light that faded away like morning mist. Jake sat in the quiet living room, holding the crystal device and trying to process what had just happened. He had just spent the night with a girl from another world, and somehow, impossibly,